YouTube, welcome back to the channel. You're watching Gunplay TV. And today, as we can see on the table, we've got the all new for 2022 X300 T or Turbo from Surefire. So you're probably looking at this and thinking, hey, looks more or less identical to the X300 U that I've got on my Glock 19. Well, I can tell you that this is the high Candela variant of the X300. Again, all new for 2022. You're going to get a lot more intensity out of this light, and we're going to get into some of the differences here in a bit. But before we do that, I'm going to ask that you pause this video now, scroll down, take a look for that subscribe button, and once you found it, go ahead and give that a click for me. I do appreciate it. Without further ado, let's get straight into the box.
Reach for the sky.
So, as I said in the introduction, X300, of course, a weapon light that's been around for quite a while and something of a fan favorite in the industry as far as I'm concerned. Now, for those of us that consider ourselves to be brushed up on the accessories market as far as firearms go, we've been waiting for these X300 turbos for quite a while. Now, Surefire, of course, is coming with a full turbo line of lights. Just to give you guys a bit of background, right? I think many of us that are watching this video are probably familiar with the likes of Cloud Defensive and Mod Light, and those guys came onto the scene not too long ago and really shook things up with very high Candela lights. Now, up until that point, Lumens was more or less the name of the game. And so for those of us that aren't very familiar, right, Lumens essentially just captures or measures, I should say, the output of a light as it pours out of the housing, right? So next to me, I've got a floodlight, which is probably close to 1,000 lumens, but of course, it's not gonna reach out very far, right? It just provides flooded illumination for the table. Furthermore, right, you might have a 2,000 lumen floodlight above your garage. That's not gonna reach out beyond 50 feet, right? But it is very bright at its source. And so that is a measure of brightness. That's essentially lumens at the end of the day. Now, Candela comes into play, and this is really where Mod Light and Cloud Defensive managed to shake up the industry as far as I'm concerned. Candela is more of intensity on target, and oftentimes, at least with weapon lights, it translates to the range and the amount of punch that your light is gonna have downrange. So again, as I mentioned, right, Mod Light, Cloud Defensive, very, very high-end light manufacturers, and really Surefire didn't have anything close to that level of Candela output. Now, we've been waiting again for the turbo line for quite a while since SHOT Show last year. Surefire announced that they were going to be coming out with these from rifle lights, pistol lights as we see on the table, as well as EDC pocket clip lights, if you will. And so it's been a long road coming. In fact, I believe these were supposed to drop back in April of this year. It is now August, so let that say what it will. They finally did come out. But let's just go through the box and then we'll break it open, and I'll compare this to my existing X300 U and kind of tell you guys what made me go with this particular light. So as we see on the front, right, it is going to be a high Candela light, as they boast. It's going to be 66,000 Candela output. Okay, so again, we'll get the X300 U up on the table and we'll compare some of the numbers there. Now, furthermore, it's only going to have an hour and a half of runtime. Now, of course, with a weapon mounted light, we're not leaving these things on for extended periods like we might with a light that we keep under the hood of our cars. We work on the engine. So that's not really a downside as far as I'm concerned. Now, one thing that a lot of people have kind of called out is the 650 lumen output. Now, if you know anything about the X300 U, the Ultra, the previous variety, it had 1,000 lumen output. But as I just mentioned, right, lumens aren't everything when it comes to weapon lights especially. Now, beyond that, they've gone so far as to keep the exact same construction and dimensions that we know and love from the X300 U. And of course, what that really translates to is you do not need to buy a new holster if you've already got one that's, fitted for an X300 U. The X300 T will drop right in, and of course that's money savings and certainly a big consideration for law enforcement departments or otherwise, but us as private citizens as well. It's always good to save that money and not have to buy a new holster just because you bought a new light. Okay, so of course the turbo and beam pattern is going to run on two 123A lithium batteries, and it is IPX7 waterproof down to 1 meter. So let's go ahead and break open the box and see what we got inside. So we'll throw that aside, lift up our plastic here, and of course we are presented with the X300 Turbo. Okay, I'll put the rest of this stuff aside. We'll take a look at that here in a bit. We should already have the batteries inside of this. I'll go ahead and pop open the battery compartment and remove our protective battery tab there and lock that back down. Now, of course, as I mentioned, right, the exact same dimensions and certainly the exact same construction that we know and love from Surefire. So certainly no disappointments there so far. Now, just to kind of give you guys a 360 around the light, if you aren't familiar with what an X300 looks like, this of course is going to be the X300 T, and it's the B variety. So there actually is an A and B variant of both the Ultra and the Turbo variant of the X300. Now, for anybody who is kind of new to these lights and is interested in buying one, what I'll tell you is if you have a polymer framed firearm like a Glock 19, you're going to want to go with the X300 A. Whether you go with the Turbo or the Ultra, you're going to want to go with the A. It's going to have a more polymer on polymer mounting solution, and it's not going to beat up your receiver or your frame nearly as bad. Now, you can, of course, use the B on a polymer framed firearm, but you just want to make sure you don't cinch that thing down too tight to where you damage the frame. Now, the B variety, as we have here, is going to be a thumb screw mount. And it's very good for your 1911s or 2011s, anything with an alloy or steel frame. Your X300 Bs are gonna find themselves right at home on those. Okay, but you know, walking around the light, more or less the exact same dimensions that we know and love from the X300. In fact, I'll go ahead and break out my old X300. Now this is an X300 Ultra, and if you're looking at the color there, this is actually the Sig Sauer Legion branded variety thereof. So this is actually going to be sold. I had this currently on my Staccato P, but naturally with the gun that nice, I wanted a light that is cutting edge and pushing the limits. And so I'm going to be swapping this out for my X300 T. So again, the Ultra and the Turbo side by side, essentially the exact same dimensions, and that's really one of the major selling points when moving to this new platform. As I mentioned, a lot of us already have holsters, and we might not be interested in purchasing a new one just because we wanted to upgrade to the latest and greatest light, okay? So one thing I will note is it appears, forgive me as I kind of wipe some of that grease off the front of my X300 there, it appears that the cone or the reflector housing is a bit deeper in the Turbo than it is on the Ultra. Now that might lend itself to more throw. We'll take a look at that here side by side, and then we'll try to get these out in the dark so we can see kind of the difference in the beam patterns. But in the interest of time, I will go ahead and kind of compare the two side by side. Now we have the X300 Ultra, the old variety here in my left hand. Again, a pretty decent hotspot. These I've had no issues with. Of course, this is going to have 1,000 lumen output as compared to the 650 lumen output. Actually, Surefire is going so far as to not print that on the turbos. But again, the Ultra here, and then we've got the Turbo here. And you can see right off the bat the difference in that hotspot. Now, again, I'll get these things out. We'll compare them and see kind of the differences, but that hotspot just being so intense. Now, of course, we are at a very relatively close range here, right? Maybe a foot and a half off the table. But when you have a hotspot that's that intense, that's going to translate into range for your weapon light. Now, to have all that extra candela and potential range in a platform that's typically designed for maybe 25 yards in might not make sense to most people, right? But again, a byproduct of candela, of course, it's going to be range, as I mentioned, but also it's going to be intensity on target, which means that you may or may not, depending on the situation, have the potential and the ability to disarm a threat with light alone, right? This is going to cause an individual to recoil, to cover their eyes, to flinch, just because of the intensity of that light on target. And so that is, again, a major selling factor in going to the X300 T. Now, as promised, I did want to kind of compare some of the stats between these two lights. You are going to get 650 lumens with the Turbo, and the older Ultra variety, you are going to have 1,000 lumens. Again, don't allow lumens to be the end-all be-all. It's essentially just light output, but not range, not intensity on target. So keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to candela, which of course is going to translate to the range of that light and the intensity of that light at its target, you're going to get 66,000 candela out of the X300 Turbo, the new variety. Now, when you compare that to the older Ultra variety, you're only going to get 15,900 candela. So quite a jump between the two. Now, that might not seem like a fair comparison. Of course, you're going to get more lumens with the Ultra, but much less candela, much less range. With a pistol light, that may or may not be a deal breaker for you. But again, in the interest of following the trends in the industry and keeping up with the competition, Surefire came out with this Turbo line. And again, we'll see this with the rifle-mounted scout lights here shortly, as well as handheld lights as well. But it's worth noting that, again, Mod Light and Cloud Defensive more or less kind of led the charge for quite a while when it came to candela output. And I would say that when kind of comparing these lights, you know, the next closest competitor to this new X300 Turbo is going to be the Mod Light PLH or the Mod Light PL350, okay? Now it's worth noting that you're only gonna get 54,000 Candela out of that Mod Light. So Surefire certainly did take its time bringing something to the table, but you can rest assured that this is more or less the highest Candela pistol light at the moment. Now, again, Cloud Defensive is working on a pistol light here in parallel. That should be coming soon, as they say. So we'll see how this stacks up to that. Maybe Cloud Defensive has the advantage of seeing what Surefire brings to the table before releasing their option. But neither here nor there. At this time, Surefire is back in the game. A lot of people, diehard fans of Surefire, you know, we defended them as best we could, but they weren't pushing the limits the way that some of these other brands are. And it's certainly good to see that that's no longer the case. Now, last but certainly not least, we need to consider the price of these options, okay? And so, you know, Surefire's MSRP on the Ultras is around $359 to $369, okay? Now, as we all know, the Ultras or the U's can be had for, you know, between $250 and $300 more or less, street price, sometimes lower than that. And so, you know, don't let that price dissuade you. Oftentimes, you're gonna get what you pay for when it comes to these lights, right? I'm not gonna say that, you know, you shouldn't go buy an OLED if that's all that you can get, but if you do have the funds and you're gonna trust your life to a firearm, you want to place a light on that firearm, I certainly recommend that you go with a company with a reputation for durability and reliability such as Surefire. Now, for the new version, the Turbos, Surefire's got those listed at $369. Now, I will say that this one came from Big Tech's Outdoors, and after shipping, I probably paid around $350, and I expect that price to kind of adjust over time, much the way that the Ultras did, as they've sat on the market for more and more time now. Of course, this is a brand new light. As far as I can tell, Big Tech's and Primary Arms were the only places to get these in, at least so far. Surefire actually just updated their site to have this listed on it. So, a relatively new product, and I wanted to make sure that I brought it to you guys as soon as it landed. In fact, I've not even mounted this on a firearm yet. This is gonna be going on my Staccato P, and I figured for such a nice firearm, it's probably best that I have a light that's gonna complement it. Now, I've got this already mounted up on my Staccato P, been doing a little bit of dry fire with it, and so far, I'm very happy with it. Again, the output is spectacular, right? It's on par with the Mod Light that I've got mounted on my MCX, but neither here nor there. I did want to share one last detail between the two of these. I did see some questions online about whether or not the switches had changed or been updated, and I can confirm that they both work identically, right? And so you either get constant on by flicking this up or down, right? So they're unidirectional in that regard, or you can simply press and hold for momentary, okay? And so that's exactly the same for the new turbos. But all in all, a very good upgrade. Is it worth the price? That's something that you will have to decide for yourself, but it's certainly good to go Candela over Lumens in my mind. So I hope that you've found this video educational, inspirational, or entertaining in one way, shape, or another. And if so, I'd ask that if you haven't already, you go ahead and hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and leave a comment while you're down there. It really does help to push these videos through the algorithm. And as I said, I really do appreciate it. With all that being said, I'm gone.